The leader of Venezuela can preserve access to debt markets. He can protect oil shipments that would be vulnerable to bondholder seizure. And then they say this. They say the government's priority is to pay the sovereign debt. That's an analyst at Barclays. And then they talk about how they have made, over the years, from Hugo Chavez, over his 14-year tenure, they made a 692% return on investment. And what do the people of Venezuela get from this guy who said that he was for the people, this communist leader? He was for the bankers. The bankers got nearly a 700% return on investment. These people don't even have drinking water. They have no supplies. And the few people who do have money, I guess a few of the people inside the government can try to pay $47,000 for an iPhone. This is what is ahead if we don't say no to the bankers.
You are committing sins of the future that you don't even know are sins yet. And according to privacy expert Brad Templeton, time-traveling robots could punish us for future crimes.
Today, while the AI is not that good, we are getting very good at recording everything because storage has gotten cheap, cheap, cheap. And so we are recording all that stuff that goes through Facebook, all the stuff that goes through networks, all the movements of your cell phones that I told you about, all the video from those surveillance cameras that you passed by today, and ATM machines and stores and so on, and here on a military basis. That's all being recorded, and in the future they'll be able to analyze that data.
Now, these are not Terminator-style robots that are going to come from the future and kill us, but they're simple AI bots that are already in existence. They'll be a little bit more sophisticated, and they'll be able to comb through all of that digital data and be exploited by technologically sophisticated dictatorships. Online speech, for example, it's considered acceptable under today's free speech laws, but it could also be denounced as politically incorrect in the future, with the sinner subjected to retroactive fines or re-education. Just look at the way they're treating journalists and whistleblowers right now. All of that communication, all those photos, all those videos, they're all being stored in digital form indefinitely by companies like Google and Amazon. The NSA's data center in Utah can hold 1 trillion terabytes of data. This includes complete contents of private emails, cell phone calls, and Google searches, as well as all sorts of other digital pocket litter like parking receipts and travel itinerary. Supercomputers run 1,000 trillion calculations per second as part of a data mining process that seeks to identify suspects before they commit a crime or if they associate with terror suspects. So think of this NSA facility as the beginning of Minority Report. And it's interesting to note that the NSA claims to have shut down their massive data collection program with the recent expiration of the Patriot Act, but the agency has said that they're not going to be deleting any of that metadata. They're just going to hold on to it for safekeeping. They're just protecting it at the moment because they know they're going to be reauthorized at some point in the future to use it once again for data mining and combing through retroactively. We reported that the Swiss police released a pre-crime smartphone app which warns users about crimes before they are committed, and it's based on criminal prediction software. Numerous police departments in the US are also using similar technology, such as the HunchLab prediction software. HunchLab allows officers to best forecast when and where crimes are likely to emerge using years' worth of past crime data. This type of predictive programming software is just going to become more prevalent the smarter it becomes. And artificial intelligence like Siri and even the Google search bar become more intelligent the more that we interact with it. So they benefit from combing through troves of online data, everything that we are sharing with the internet, searching on the internet, uploading and typing into the internet. It's being stored and collected, and that is the real reason for all of this data storage. And of course, it brings us right back around again to the end game of mastering the human domain.
The human domain encompasses the totality of the physical, cultural, and social environments that influence human behavior, explained Admiral McRaven. Success in this domain won't be achieved by traditional ground, naval, or air forces. Instead, success in the human domain will depend upon understanding the human terrain and establishing trust with those individuals who occupy that space. McRaven continued by saying, building an understanding of the human domain requires boots on the ground, feeding information into the network. A living active map where human beings are movable real-time landmarks and everyone's personal thoughts, feelings, medical information, belief systems, history, basically every shred of information about the individuals in any region on that map will make up the terrain. During his famous farewell address, Eisenhower warned the American people of an imminent and internal threat, a scientific elite.
We must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific, technological elite.
A tech startup, Recorded Future, that uses a system of filtering through and classifying open source data, demonstrated their predictive analytics capability during the 2012 GeoInt conference. Trajectory magazine reports, the concept is to find people who are talking about the future. Vice President for Recorded Future, Matt Kodema, says, we can basically roll back the clock. We know that this particular did happen in this time at this place. Now let's go back a week before that and look at the publications. Who was predicting that accurately? Who wasn't? Add this layer of predictive analytics on top of the other human domain analytic, and you begin to get an idea of the scope and range of the overarching, inescapable control grid these scientific controllers are constructing.
Around 9 p.m. Charleston, South Carolina time, horror ensued at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church on Wednesday. A church immersed in an American historical past involving freedom of religion, rebellion, and oppression as America grew from its Reconstruction roots. Attacked by modern society's ills. A lurking sickness that is completely ignored as the clear exploitation of the hearts and minds of good Americans goes unchecked. Within hours, guns and white people were being blamed. Hours after that, on the heels of getting his Trans-Pacific Partnership nearly to the finish line, a trade initiative written by corporate lawyers and designed to bypass our government and rights to a world government run by big banks, President Obama backed up the fool's rhetoric of gun confiscation to the nation.
It is in our power to do something about it. I say that recognizing the politics in this town foreclose a lot of those avenues right now.
Obama has armed himself with a far more powerful weapon than a gun. He has executive orders, and he means to use them. Regardless of the fact that gun violence has dropped by 49% in the past 20 years, 56% of Americans believe gun crime is worse today than it was 20 years ago. Well, who can blame them? From 2007 to 2013, there were 16.4 average mass shootings per year, as opposed to 6.4 shootings annually from 2000 to 2006. According to FBI crime statistics, there were 1,043 casualties and wounded Americans as a result of these attacks from the year 2000 to 2013. Well, maybe President Obama is right then. No, he's wrong. The facts are right. Facts that blatantly show he is ignoring major factors contributing to the increase. There are key players to blame at work here. The pharmaceutical companies being public enemy number one. Psychiatric drugs have contributed to nearly every mass shooting incident in the last 20 years. But you won't find Obama blaming them. They gave him $20 million just for his 2008 campaign alone. The other culprit is gun-free zones. 92% of mass shootings since 2009 occurred in gun-free zones, according to the Crime Prevention Research Center, which created a study as a response to the statistically misleading Everytown for Gun Safety study. Blaming all white people, which angers all ethnicities that aren't subjected to the mental illness that is racism, is the other go-to dig used by the liberal media agenda. Salon's blood-boiling disinformation article, Charleston Church Massacre, the Violence White America Must Answer For, could be the most racist piece of garbage I've read in recent memory, insinuating it is the fault of the right-wing media, claiming white men and white families are violent, and saying all white America is violent. I can't help but challenge the author, Chauncey DeVega, to a debate. Just go look at the data, Chauncey. Black folks are killing black folks, and white folks are killing white folks. But when it comes to black on white, and vice versa, blacks double the number of whites. But I digress. The U.S. government has been trying to take black folks' guns for a long time. But black folks aren't going to sit idly by and listen to the president's rhetoric. And neither is the rest of America. As Obama's border amnesty unleashes more criminals onto American streets, criminals fleeing countries where guns are illegal. Last year, I reported how NC Fire was tabulating the full-blown crisis of child rape by illegals in North Carolina. New numbers show that there were 518 charges of child rape by illegals in North Carolina in the month of January 2015 alone. There has never been a more important time in recent history for Americans to have a gun in the house to protect themselves from what is quietly happening to American families, white, black, plaid, or otherwise. God bless the sweet and righteous fallen souls we lost Wednesday night. May the truth behind their deaths not be in vain. United we stand, divided we fall. John Bound for INFOWARS.com.
19 people were shot and 1 person killed in 2 mass shootings over the weekend. In Detroit Saturday night, 1 person was killed and 9 were wounded after a block party descended into chaos. Detroit's chief of police labeled the culprits urban terrorists. A similar situation unfolded in Philadelphia when a block party turned into a mass shooting. 10 people were hospitalized, including 3 children. Miraculously, all the victims in that shooting, including an 18-month-old girl, were listed in stable condition. While the media has been busy focusing on the heinous Charleston shooting, these 2 events seem to have been a mere footnote in mainstream coverage. In fact, you probably didn't even hear about these incidents until now. These 2 shootings were a result of black-on-black violence, and therefore don't fit neatly into the constant barrage of race-baiting division that's currently being promoted. Wherever racial divisiveness rears its ugly head, you can be sure Al Sharpton and newly minted social justice warrior D. Ray McKesson are not far behind. After successful stops in Ferguson, Missouri, Baltimore, Maryland, and McKinney, Texas, the next destination on the itinerary was Charleston, South Carolina. Black Lives Matter protesters descended on the city this weekend and set about vandalizing a historical monument to get their point across. But according to the reaction on social media, Charleston is pushing back against the race baiters in their city by trending the hashtag #GoHomeDRay. Black Lives Matter supporters don't seem to care about all lives, specifically black people killing other black people, despite the fact that black-on-black crime accounts for 93% of all black murder victims in the United States. It remains to be seen whether or not the Black Lives Matter protesters will stage an event in Detroit or Philadelphia.
Joining us on the phone is Michelle Roten, and she is the founder, I believe, of Nurses Against Mandatory Vaccines. We spoke to her back on May the 1st because it's very important as we see all these bills coming across the United States for mandatory vaccines to understand this has been going on for a long time. And of course, it's not just in schools as we're seeing the main thrust right now. It's been against people in the health professions, especially telling them they could not work unless they got vaccines. So we talked to her about that initially, and she had a bombshell revelation within that context, telling us about the harmful effects that she had witnessed firsthand on children in neonatal intensive care, premature infants, who were given the vaccines on schedule regardless of their physical condition. And of course, their physical condition was not the same as a baby that had gone full term that was 2 months old. These were children that were born prematurely, and even though they were born just a couple of months ago, they were still on the same vaccine schedule. Now, before we get into the interview with an update from the Journal of the American Medical Association validating what Michelle had said, when I give you her qualifications, of course, she is a master's science in nursing. We have a lot of initials after her name. I just want you to understand what these are if you're not a medical professional. The Master Science in Nursing, Registered Nurse Certified, a Nursing Interventions Classification, Certification, Certified in